If you missed part 1 of this story, please check it out in the corner of this page or by checking the description of this video. For everyone else, thank you for making part 1 blow the fuck up like I never thought possible. See me after class. We cut back to Tommy and Joel on one of their first patrols together shortly after Joel and Ellie return to stay in Jackson, before Ellie has been told the truth. They're walking along a road near the town, completing their rounds and keeping the town safe. They talk a bit brother to brother. Tommy brings up how there seems to be some tension between him and Ellie. "Haven't ironed that one out yet, huh?" Tommy says. It's going to take a mighty amount of ironing, little brother," Joel returns, with that tone that suggests he's kind of accepted that she's unlikely to accept what he did. Tommy asks if he's come clean to her about Salt Lake, tells him it'll probably be for the best, rather than holding on to the lie. He struggles to justify his keeping of the secret. Perhaps he mentions that he's got a few things in mind to cheer her up, such as an old museum he was going to go looking for that he heard about and saw on some maps. They talk about their old days and what Tommy did after leaving the QZ. Joel says something along the lines of, "Marlene told me you left the Fireflies not long after you left Boston. What was that about?" They get into it and clear things up. He mentions how maybe Joel's analysis of the Fireflies wasn't 100% wrong, but he doesn't regret the time he spent with them. Trying to do the right thing is all anyone can ask of you. Joel quietly murmurs. He knows Tommy's right and that he should be applying those words to his own life, to his relationship with Ellie. He talks about meeting Maria, about finding Jackson and how they trusted him and brought him in. "Like I said, this place gives people second chances. Forget all that stuff from those years back. You can pay for that here. Just doing your part. I'm sure they'd appreciate those guns protecting the town," he says in his light tone. They talk a bit more about life before, about Ellie and Maria, until they hear some shouting and run towards it, just as Tommy did in present-day Seattle. There's a survivor couple fighting off a group of infected, say about 5 to 7 strong. Seamlessly into gameplay, as the conversation prior can all take place with control on the stick, you get to kill the infected. These brothers work well together. They've obviously missed each other. When the infected are cleared, the survivors keep their distance. They're unsure of Joel and Tommy. Tommy talks to them and explains that they have a town nearby where these survivors can rest and eat and maybe even stay. Joel kind of flinches as Tommy tells them more information that Joel himself wouldn't so quickly give away. He's clearly still in survivor mode and has these habits of keeping everyone unfamiliar at a distance, so he stops Tommy and pulls him aside to say how he's apprehensive about bringing these people in. Tommy reiterates to Joel that Jackson is a welcoming place and he'll need to come around to showing kindness again. You know, if our whole species keeps being afraid of one another, we'll never get back to living as well as we did before. Joel reluctantly backs down and they take the couple back to town. This shows how Tommy, over the years of peace in Wyoming, made Joel a more trusting person. Now some people felt that it was pretty jarring seeing Joel save a stranger and be so open and trusting with her in part 2. Now, I didn't personally feel that, but I can understand the thought process behind that. Thing is, it's not like Joel wanted to constantly be so closed off and untrusting, but it was a self-preservation tactic. And 4 to 5 years spent in the safety of Jackson doing these things, which are documented in the game to have happened on multiple occasions, it's bound to help break down those walls he built up. I think a scene like this would help to lend believability to Joel's actions in part 2 for those who didn't find that it was realistic, but it also plays a second role. We're seeing this from Tommy's perspective, and it's easy for people to try and find reasons to blame themselves for bad things happening in their lives. And this is what's happening to Tommy as he's remembering this moment. Tommy feels guilt in his part of making Joel a more trusting person. That trust in the end got him killed. Maybe if I didn't open up and help him tear him down his defenses, maybe he'd have left Abby to die. And maybe I'd still be talking to him. Tommy continues to make his way through the city. I like this idea of it being a different time of day than Ellie and Dina's run through the town. You know, something like it being darker in the sky can make a pretty great difference to the vibe of an area, like Sekiro with the Ashina Castle and outskirts, or Dishonored with Dunwall Tower. So imagine it's maybe nighttime or early morning. There should be plenty of gameplay. I wouldn't want this to be purely a movie, but it is very much about telling a story rather than presenting evolutionary gameplay. More like Left Behind, you know, that was a nice additional thing. It expand much on the gameplay, really. It just told a bit more story. It maybe shouldn't be very open world like the downtown section of part 2, even though I loved that section, but we just need to keep things moving. It's already a story that's on the slower side of things, and I acknowledge that the beginning I wrote works out to be like 10 to 15 minutes of cutscenes before the first bit of gameplay, so we're balancing the scales once the situation calls for it, and I think it calls for it around here. So Tommy gets to the Saravina Hotel and sees a patrol leaving with a package of supplies, so there's now only a handful of soldiers left at the hotel. He sneaks his way in, gameplay for all of it, but stealth is encouraged. Once he clears the lobby, he goes to the side door and blocks it with a metal pipe before heading upstairs. Maybe like in part 1, Tommy interacts with some part of the environment to move on, and this triggers the cutscene of him catching and interrogating the 2 WLF, so a bit of a juxtaposition with him acting similarly to Joel with David's group in part 1, but rather than being on a mission to rescue someone, this time it's a mission to kill someone. I imagine we could use one of the rooms on the other side of the hallway. Perhaps 2 of the soldiers heard Tommy massacring the WLF downstairs and went to hide as they were unarmed, something like that. Have Tommy be just as angry as Joel was before. Tommy never really lost this survivor in him from the earlier life and the early days of the outbreak. He takes them down and begins interrogating them. Initially about the WLF, where they patrol the heaviest and where he might find Abby. They tell him what he wants to know and that he'll need to head in the direction of the TV station, and so he demands to know how to open the gates. Once he's confirmed they're telling the truth, he kills them mercilessly and continues travelling through the city. So moving forward from this point on, the bulk of the enemies would really be the WLF. The Seraphites are good fun to fight, but an encounter with them would kind of need to fit in with the timeline and scenario. It would be a bit jarring if they were to appear just for no reason in a part of town they haven't been present in and then disappear again. Tommy gets to a new part of the city not explored in the main game of part 2. I picture something of a run-down, disused highway with a sprinkling of rusted cars. Not tons, not covered. There's some spotlights and talking up ahead, so Tommy keeps low, but he gets grabbed from behind by a couple of WLF when passing near their camp. They drag him a bit closer to the camp, and they call over the rest of the squad to get their attention so that they look at this intruder. But he pulls one arm free and shoots one. The other runs towards the camp and dives behind cover. You get straight into gameplay and wipe out this camp however you wish. There's the opportunity for stealth by rotating around the tents and using the nearby surroundings of cars and crates and all of that as soon as you get on the stick. Once they're dead and the noises calm down, you can hear static noise and radio chatter. You follow the noise to find a radio receiver and transmitter setup. It's pretty heavy-duty military kit, similar to that in the theatre. Around the tent there would be a nice supply of ammo and materials since the WLF are well stocked. Tommy listens as the WLF talk about a lone male trespasser armed near another part of the city. They mention his whereabouts, so Tommy takes the opportunity to go in the other direction since the patrol will be distracted by this unknown intruder. There's a numbered map pinned up in the tent just above the radio setup, so he takes the map, sees the area that he's in, and the area where the trespasser has been spotted. It was in the direction he was going, so he takes an alternate path where there's a highway road he needs to pass to get towards the marina, where he's told Abby's going to be staying. This is all gameplay. You can walk straight onto the bridge if you like, and Tommy will make a comment about the swarm of infected, and he's right. This is one of the biggest crowds we've seen in either game. Around 20 or so infected, including several clickers and one bloater. Going head on is very deadly. You can try it if you like, and surely some players would be successful. There's some incredible psychopaths out there who pull off some ridiculous shit in these games, but there's no question it's definitely going to drain your weapons and supplies. What the player doesn't know, and it's entirely up to them to find out, is that there's a nearby structure, building, like a house, hotel, high-rise of some sort, whatever, with a vantage point set up by previously stationed WLF. It would be cool if it was one of these classic Naughty Dog, I've played this game to the end 10 times and I didn't notice this area type of vibes. There's a relatively wealthy stash of ammo and a great view of the highway. From here, you can thin the herd with your sniper by shooting the infected. Another thing to discover within this discovery is that you can distract the infected with well-placed shots from this viewpoint, as the sound of the bullet impact would be stronger and closer than the noise from the gun itself, similar to how Tommy uses it in the Finding Strings flashback and at the marina later on in this timeline. So you can do this to spread them out, maybe even then go immediately back down and sneak through the herd for minimal gun usage if that's what you want to do, or you can find a well-placed distraction object that can lure these infected off, something like a broken piece of the highway's barrier so that they can fall to their death. You can get about 7 or 8 of them killed this way and deal with the rest however you like, stealth or full on. I don't think it'd be right for all of them to fall off. Maybe it would, but this should still be a pretty challenging and scary area. I don't want to make Seattle look any more dreamlike than it does. It's a fucking nightmare. But still, thinning the herd can help tremendously. Once you've passed the highway, you've still got some more ground to cover. This path that Tommy took proves longer and less direct than the original plan, but it's a lot more safe than fighting head-on and bumping into those WLF patrols. He ends up passing through a ritzy section of the city. Looks like the rich neighborhood. Plenty of fancy shops around, whatever the USA equivalent of Marks and Spencer's is, I don't know geology. Most of the stores are looted, but he comes across a jewelry store that has a few things not taken. I mean, what use of fine gems and jewelry in a world like this? He spots a beautiful necklace. Normally he wouldn't take things like this, but he thinks of Maria, how she must be scared sick at the moment. He feels bad for leaving her and goes against her wishes, but he just hopes he can get back home and tell her in person. He'd like to bring home a peace offering, and this is probably the best he could find. Tommy walks along the shoreline of the Seattle main island. He's not far from the aquarium now, but still has a bit of distance to cover. As he gets closer, he hears commotion and several vehicle engines. He cautiously keeps moving, past the road where the Abby Day 3 encounter happens, and sees the large squadron of WLF going towards the boats, which we know they're doing because of Isaac's orders to storm the Seraphied Island. He sees Manny among them, distributing orders and telling them things like, "We're storming them with everything we've got, get your fucking heads in the game," that sort of thing. He recognises Manny as one of the ones with Abby's group and is tempted to just open fire, but he's wise enough to know that this many soldiers will make light work of him, and if he fights them head on, he's going to fail. But he's not giving up. He's so close to the aquarium and his goal at this point. He holes up in a nearby building and starts picking them off. This is all gameplay. The challenge is moving between a bunch of viewpoints, but not staying in one place too long or neglecting enemies that are approaching or detecting you. Messing up means that they get a shot on you, and those shots can do significant damage considering the only parts of Tommy that would be visible for hit purposes are his upper body and head. The battle wobbles between being in Tommy's favour and the WLF, which causes Tommy to retreat a bit and end up in the building we find him in during the main game. After a lot of WLF are killed, Manny manages to escape and hole up in a safe spot, and we get to the cutscene. Manny tries to leave a couple of times, but Tommy keeps him pinned down. He's relentless and holds him down for a while. After a while of this stalemate, keeping them both in the same place, he notices some movement in the bushes nearby. As the foliage shakes, he sees a figure emerge. It's Abby. He turns his scope to her and recognises her. He has the same look of disbelief and anger as before. This time he blinks, he shakes his head a little bit, aims in. It's definitely her. "I got you, motherfucker." Manny noticed her too, and as Tommy is moving his focus, it gives him enough time to jump out of his cover. Tommy takes the shot just as Manny tackles her to cover. Tommy can't immediately tell if he hit either of them, but he is pissed off. Quick flash cuts following Tommy's perspective of the preceding fight, retreating into the building, firing back, getting into the restaurant, headshotting Manny, and finally being tackled into the water, and a quick cut to black. Now, I'd have loved to have that be a playable series of events, but the events of the game can't really be altered. Having that be playable would give the player agency to dictate the events of the scene, but they're already set in stone for the story. What would be pretty sick, alternatively, is a continuous single take between him getting the headshot on Manny, retreating back into the restaurant, scanning the room repeatedly with his rifle raised, checking for Abby, the music and suspense doing all the work as he quickly but carefully makes his way to the other side of the restaurant before holding up behind the exit door. Abby emerges, throws him off. Gotta love a continuous take. And this would be one very fun way to keep things exciting and tense even if you know what happens next. Tommy gets out of the water and lays low on shore as fleets of WLF boats full of armed soldiers load up and sail out. He heads back inland to see if he can clean himself up and track where Abby went, and as he's doing so, he crosses paths with Jesse. They talk about what's happened. Tommy grills him for leaving Jackson. Jesse mentions how he couldn't not come to help Ellie and Dina, and he sure as shit isn't going to leave behind the man who welcomed him into Jackson some years ago. Tommy didn't deserve to die being gunned down by random people hundreds of miles from home, and Maria didn't deserve to be alone again. Tommy says he's just about ready to give up on the mission. The stakes are too high with a whole army in the way, and he's killed more living people in the last few days than he has since he left the Hunters and the Fireflies. He might not like it, but he knows he's made Abby hurt. She can rot in that aquarium. Jesse tells him that he's glad to hear that, but Ellie is going to the aquarium to hunt Abby. She's too far into her own head to realize how much danger she's putting herself in, and she needs them to pull her back. So he immediately changes his mind and says he has to go help her. It's too dangerous. Tommy and Jesse quickly make their way to the aquarium, which is seen through gameplay. On their way, they talk about what's happened with the both of them, as well as Ellie and Dina, how he came because Ellie and Dina were sent to find him, and he didn't trust Ellie to not get caught up in her own desires and put herself at risk chasing vengeance. How Dina is pregnant and Ellie wouldn't come with Jesse to find Tommy because she's so determined to find Abby. Tommy's fearful for Ellie, of course, but now for Dina too. They get to the aquarium, and as they're outside, they hear shouting followed by a gunshot. They run into the building, weapons drawn. They hear panic and heavy breathing and a familiar voice down the hall. Tommy signals with his hands that he'll check down the hall, and Jesse nods and points that he'll check the other rooms. Tommy quietly enters the room and sees Ellie and the two people she's just killed, including a pregnant woman. Jesse runs in shortly after. They both don't need long to figure out the situation. Ellie just killed a pregnant girl, and a man both seem to be unarmed. The fear and guilt Ellie is showing says what everyone in the room is thinking. It's gone too far. It's time to wrap it up. They calm her a bit and take her out of the aquarium. They sneak through the city to get back to the theatre. All these people want now is to grab Dina and get out of this godforsaken city. Not a word is said other than a few directions for the whole walk. They walk pretty much in single file, Jesse in front, Ellie in the middle, and Tommy at the back, like the protector he's always been. Now, the way in which they travel back to the theatre in an awkward silence, trying not to look at each other, juxtaposes the horse ride from the ranch back to Jackson in part 1. Tommy looks forward at Ellie and he feels awful about what she's had to do, what she's been driven to do. He thinks of the little girl who showed up at their gate some years ago, that fierce but lively kid. He remembers more peaceful times with her. He remembers... We cut back to roughly a year or so after Ellie and Joel came to Jackson. They are settled, and the conflict between the two of them it's dormant for the most part. They've both found peace in this place, and for now they'd rather not risk tarnishing that with squabbles and arguments. Besides, at the moment there's plenty of other things for her to be occupied by and worried about, like girls and movies and clothes. Tommy comes over to Ellie's room to grab her. Joel is cooking dinner for the family tonight, and it's almost done. He walks in and she has her music playing and she's sketching, a familiar sight to the Millers and any of Ellie's friends. He taps on the door as it creaks open. It was already ajar. He shouts that Joel wants her inside as they're plating up the food. She hears him and says, "Thanks, I'll be over now." He walks a bit closer and peers over at the drawings and asks about them out of curiosity. It's a common sight to see her drawing, but it occurred to him that he hasn't really shown an interest in them much so far. She's drawing some animals in a city environment, most noticeably giraffes. The surroundings show a hospital, what looks like a cathedral, and a park. He questions the drawing in his trademark optimistic uncle tone. He has this charm about him that puts people at ease, and she has her same shy, closed-off body language that she did at the start of part 2. But she trusts Tommy. She talks to him about the cross-country journey from part 1 and how she and Joel saw a bunch of giraffes in Salt Lake City. How sharing this experience with Joel got him to open up a bit, and he actually wanted them to head back to Jackson there and then. It was a shock to him that Joel wanted that, and that it was this kid who had to talk him out of it and get him to see this through to the end. Joel conveniently left out little wholesome details from his retelling of the story when he got back to Jackson. He's secretly touched by his brother's humanity, but cracks a joke about him, how it's a surprise he isn't a frowning concrete statue, and moves on. No doubt trying to distance himself from the topic of Salt Lake City because he knows what she doesn't, and it kills him to keep that truth from her. They go to the house and have dinner. In total, it's Joel, Ellie, Tommy, and Maria. It's a happy night, banter, good food, drink, and company. No dark undertones, just a reminder of how the conflict between his brother and this kid was just that. Not constant battles, but conflict. Some days she was more than happy to be around him. It was a reminder of the peace they once had in Jackson and the kindness and innocence they've lost from this venomous mission of spite on both sides. So, back to present day, we end up at the theatre for one more scene. This would pretty much start as the same cutscene as in part 2. There's not really a way around it. Tommy and Jesse are discussing the best route to get home. Maybe we can have a small one-on-one with those two before Ellie comes out from behind the stage curtain, about how much they've lost from this trip. Maybe there's still some conflict in Tommy again after seeing what's become of Ellie, and the fact he isn't sure whether the fix for that is to keep going or to give up the chase. Jesse helps him eliminate any doubt that they need to abandon this mission right now before anyone else gets hurt. Jesse, being as selfless as he is, mentioned how he's got to help everyone home so he can take care of his child now that he knows Dina's pregnant. Tommy looks happy, smiles wide, and asks, the kid's yours? Jesse smiles back and cracks a joke. Oh yeah, do you think it might be Ellie's? Anyway, the conversation gets a little somber again as Jesse mentions he's not sure if Dina will want him to be the dad to the kid, or if that'll make things awkward between him, Dina, and Ellie with their relationship going on, but if she needs help, he's given it. A tragic bit of dramatic irony overshadows this scene a bit as the audience knows that the damage has already been done. Jesse is seconds away from death. Tommy walks into the lobby, in higher spirits now, and he thinks of home. He thinks of Maria. He goes to put the necklace back in his pack after looking at it one more time, and hears the voice behind him, and then he gets attacked. As the shot fires at his face, we cut to black. Perhaps the camera angle would be better placed on the ground this time, so we can see Tommy's face and his emotion as he pleads for Ellie not to obey Abby, and to see the bullet scrape his face. He comes around as Ellie is pulling the arrow out and bandaging his leg. She's taken a while since she only has the one arm to work with. He's in agony, so is she. He can see a piece of old wood wrapped tight around Ellie's arm like a makeshift splint. It looks like it might have come from a chair leg. He sees Dina, wrapped in bandages and recovering. He sees Jesse's body under a sheet and remembers what's happened. They still need to go home. They know this, they've lost. But the fire has reignited for revenge in Ellie and Tommy. He doesn't stay awake long. It took a while for Ellie to get back to the lobby after being battered by Abby, so he lost a lot of blood. All traumatized, Ellie and Tommy especially, they leave Seattle. It's a quiet few days on the road, so we skip over them, just a few cuts. They take side roads and forest paths. They're all pretty done with open areas and ambushes. Dina spends most of it asleep, recovering from her near-fatal wounds, and Tommy puts all his strength into hiding the pain that he's in so that he can protect these people. What would normally be roughly a 13-day journey, according to Google, I haven't walked it myself, I was busy this weekend, actually ends up being the best part of a month due to their injuries and lack of transport. They wanted to take Jesse's body back with them, but couldn't justify it after the first couple of days, so buried him not far outside the Seattle walls. They get back to Jackson, through the gates without a smile between them, and there's a thick air of despair. This once happy and hopeful place is shrouded in darkness to these people now. It was once somewhere you could trust your neighbours, welcome newcomers, let your kids play till dark, but after such a colossal disruption of a long-lasting peace, people are far too rattled. "I'll make her pay," Ellie says to Tommy as Dina is being carted away for medical help while no one else is in earshot. They're both facing forward, but after she says this, he turns his head slightly towards her. She keeps looking forward, at the love of her life, now very noticeably pregnant, being carried away for medical help, and she too walks away. She doesn't look angry or on the verge of tears, she looks certain. Like there's no doubt in her mind she will do what she just said she would. He finds Maria and they're relieved to see each other, though she is horrified to see what's happened to him, a destroyed eye and a ruined leg. He limps over to her and they hug tighter than ever, and he pulls a gold necklace out of his back pocket. She looks a little confused, quite pissed off, but also touched and accepts the gift. Tommy buries the feeling inside of guilt, knowing that if he keeps chasing Abby, more people he loves will get hurt. That feeling is overshadowed by another, by anger. He blinds his own eyes to this and keeps trying, taking it day by day. Meanwhile, Ellie can't keep walking past Joel's house. Dina has her baby a short time after getting home, and this change prompts her to suggest another. She mentions a farm she heard about from one of the scouts a few miles from town. The scouts were talking about how they were going to take some of the livestock over and need to ask around to see who would be willing to leave the town and live there to tend to the farm and the animals. Ellie and Dina take it and move out of Jackson with JJ. Tommy stays. He tries to use his sniper, but he can't because of his eye. He can't go on patrol anymore because of his leg and his eye. He remained bitter after the theatre attack and kept looking for leads. The more time went on, the more this feeling of anger grew. Every time he tried to walk up the stairs and his legs screeched in pain, he thought of her. Every time the patrols went out and he wasn't among them, he thought of her. Every time he had to do something as simple as reading, he thought of her. She poisoned his mind again. Him and Ellie essentially end up swapping mindsets. So when Ellie got back to town, she was full of rage, vengeance, and hatred, while Tommy felt like there was still a bit of hope and love in the world as soon as he laid eyes on Maria again. Now Ellie is dealing with her pain and trying to move past it, while Tommy's pain only grows and grows as the universe keeps shoving in his face everything that's been taken from him. The walls get closer and closer each day, and it begins to feel more and more that him and Abby are the only ones inside those walls. He keeps telling scouts to keep an eye out and using the radio to try and find WLF activity. There seems to be radio silence since the attack on the island, so who knows what happened to them. Maria sees it's consuming him and tries to help, but he doesn't accept. The pair drift apart due to his obsession, mainly because he's become a moody, bitter person a lot of the time instead of how he used to be, because the things that used to make him feel useful and give him purpose, like patrols and safeguarding, are now off the table. The trip to Seattle took everything from him. Eventually, a new resident of Jackson mentions that he was traveling from the West Coast and came across some people who sounded exactly like Abby and Lev. He traded with them while he was on the road. He can't let this slide, but he's smart enough to know that he can't chase them himself. He's clearly infuriated, and he didn't think this far enough ahead. Here, he finally has a lead, but almost as quickly as he can grab his coat and his rifle, he realizes that he can't be the one to pursue it. In his condition, he'd last days on the road. Hunting would be a nightmare, and if he were to come across another group of bandits, his chance of coming out alive was laughable. But he has a thought. Ellie said she'll make her pay. She must still feel some of the anger that he feels. She's got to be on board with this plan to chase this lead. The second he's able to, he's taken a horse and he's heading up to the farm. He doesn't even feel he's leaving to make an offer or suggestion. He feels like he's going to give her good news and send her to finish this. It doesn't really occur to him that she wouldn't be on board. Alright, so, the farm. I think for the sake of storytelling, the scene from the farm would have to be replayed again. It needs to be fresh in memory. Skipping over a chunk of it, but playing some of it would be very grating, and it's an excellent moment. But I like the idea of some slight, subtle changes to this. I like the idea of the voice acting being slightly different in this version in order to demonstrate the difference in perspective between Tommy and Ellie and Dina in this moment. It'd be cool if Ellie's responses came off a little colder and less upset. It's same with her facial reaction and expression. In the game, she sounds and looks heartbroken to have this wound opened up again while she's trying so hard to heal. And it's clear that she's wrecked by the fact that she can't do anything. But she can't picture leaving Dina and JJ and the farm for this quest that's already taken so much from her. From Tommy's perspective, though, while this tunnel vision clouds his thoughts and it causes him to have a harder time empathizing, he sees her response as being lazy or cowardly, choosing comfort over justice and closure. A small little change like this would, it might not even be noticeable if it's been a while since you played through the original version of this scene, and that's how it should be. This should be subtle, just enough to ever so slightly align you more with Tommy's headspace, just as the original aligned you with Ellie's. Tommy, this kind and optimistic guy who's usually there to let you know that the world's a better place than you might think, he's been driven to push this girl that he really cares for into this never-ending spiral of vengeance, even though she barely made it out of the last fight alive, got back home, settled with her love on a farm, and is as safe and loved as she has ever been. He's doing this for his own selfish need to close the chapter. In his mind, she needs to die so that he can move on, so he can sleep at night, and no doubt he knows that Ellie feels the same. This is the last time we see Tommy in the main game, and it's where he's his worst self in the franchise. This is a low bar for him, and it really feels bad that we didn't get to see anything he did after this. I totally get why, they needed to demonstrate how destructive that desire is, and Tommy usually being a positive beacon is a good device for that, but in fictional DLC form, I imagine it would play out with a shot of Tommy getting to the farm, cut a few minutes, pretty much the whole cutscene from the main game, except when he leaves, we follow him rather than staying with Ellie. He storms off from the farm in anger. We get to watch his facial expressions just as we did with Ellie at the end of that. And he's going away feeling like he's been cheated. He said some pretty horrible things on the way out. He was furious with both of them. Ellie for going back on her word, and Dina for supporting her. We can add a bit more to the start and the end, Dina opening the door to greet him, some interacting with JJ, maybe that could even be playable, and him riding off to the gate to the end, but full of sadness and frustration. Okay, let's move on to a new scene. Tommy travels for a while on horseback, tired and upset. Jackson isn't too far of a ride, but he is steaming, and he doesn't want to head back into town like that, so he takes a scenic route to breathe and to think. He's already a magnet for eyes nowadays, being the brother of the guy everyone heard about, and he doesn't want to make that worse by storming into town looking like a pissed off drill sergeant. He rides a while and sees a smoke plume, and goes to investigate it. Thanks to his injuries, he isn't carrying his rifle. He can't use it, so it'd be pointless to take it outside of Jackson, keep that baby safe at home. Instead, he has a knife he keeps within arm's reach in case of any fighting, and a small pistol that he can't aim so well, so it's a last resort. As you approach the source of the smoke, which would all be done by gameplay, you can see that its source is a small campfire right next to a tent setup that's been quickly abandoned. There's a small amount of blood and various abandoned supplies, like a bit of food left over, a backpack, and the tent, in pretty tattered condition. It seems like a parent and a child were here, but left in a hurry having been attacked by something. Who knows what that was? It could have been a wild animal, some infected, anything's possible out this kind of area. But regardless, there's no presence of the family or attacker. You can look around for a while, and the last thing to inspect is the backpack. Inside, there's a small solid knife in a pouch. Must have been the kids for dire circumstances. Maybe the parent was taking them out for hunting lessons or something. And he also finds a storybook full of animals. He flicks through a few pages out of curiosity, and there's some lions, some wolves, some moose, some deer, and he flicks to a page with giraffes. In that moment, he stops. As he looks at the giraffe, his mind races, and a flood of thoughts crosses his mind as this innocent little thing triggers a flood of memory. He thinks about the conversation he had with Ellie about her and Joel's adventure and the wildlife they saw traversing Salt Lake City. He thinks about the dinners they shared together in Jackson, eating and laughing about stories they've gathered, the times of peace in that little slice of home in an otherwise grim world. He thinks about when Joel was excitedly telling Tommy about a surprise trip to the museum he's planning for Ellie's birthday. He really hopes she'll like it. About Joel's kindness and humanity. Tommy thought his brother had lost that. He thinks about Sarah, how this family has lost unimaginably before but came back. That misery didn't last. It doesn't last. You just have to keep an eye on that faint flicker of hope in the distance that tells you things are going to be okay. For a lot of people, Tommy was that flicker. Joel lost that flicker inside of him, and look where that got him. A miserable, soulless husk for over a decade. He thinks about how Joel conquered that feeling in the end and was happy in his last few years. He thinks about the morning of the day Joel died. How they were on patrol and he seemed a lot more chirpy than last time. Tommy asked him what was up, and he told him about how things with Ellie were on the mend. Maybe they'll watch a movie together. How he was happy. How it's possible after so much pain to feel anything but pain. He thinks about the conversation he just had with Ellie and how he tried to risk her chances of that exact same joy coming back into her life. She was living as good a life on that farm as possible. She was with the love of her life and a kid she adored, and they had everything. Yeah, they had bad days. Who fucking doesn't? Dirt on the windscreen, and they decided that made the whole road trip miserable. But what did he do? He pulled on those loose threads and tried to rip everything down for his own gain. How horrible are his actions, and how he's becoming an embarrassment to the memory of those he thinks he's honouring with this quest. How this insatiable, bottomless hunger for vengeance, this unending feeling of anger, it's what's keeping him from seeing the light again. Fulfilling that hate-fueled desire, it's not the finish line, it's the roadblock. This hunt, this quest, it's taken so much from all of them, but no more. It's got to end, and now he understands how. Not by holding on, not by giving everything in this pursuit of honouring his brother and everyone else they lost with an eye for an eye, but by letting go. By realising that bottomless, broken feeling he wanted so badly to get rid of isn't something Abby can help with. Only he can. Yes, you need something to fight for, but you can't fight out of hate. What did Joel do to be happy? Did he hold on to the anger he had for Fedra, for the world, for everyone who ever wronged him? Did he wake up every day and pray for Sarah to come back, or for Tess to have made it out? Maybe once upon a time, yeah, I'm sure, but not to be happy. No, he forced those things behind him and appreciated what was in front of him. What he had, not what he lost. What he's been given, not what's been taken from him. Tommy just about holds the tears back and his hands shake. Also, looking at this camp, he's realizing how easily he and Ellie can lose again, seeing how easy it would be for either of them to be taken out when they could be home with their loved ones, cared for and protected, and their legacy could be one of redemption and of love, not just a bunch of abandoned supplies in the middle of nowhere and a family never knowing what happened. He closes the book and takes it with him. It doesn't look like these campers are coming back, and it would make a nice peace offering for JJ. He'll go back to the farm and apologise, he tells himself. He will work on himself until he can face himself in the mirror again and recognise the man staring back. He will do what he can to make up for the pain that he's caused anyone around him, to Ellie, to Dina. But he needs to head home first. Early morning, Tommy gets back to the gates of Jackson. The lookouts open the gate and welcome him back in immediately. He's on foot leading his horse. There's a kind of sadness in his walk, a sense of acceptance, and he heads to the stables. As he's just outside, he can hear a familiar voice. Maria is giving a briefing to the patrol squads. She mentions recent protocols that have been adapted and their importance. Stick to your threes rather than pairs. Avoid the mountain path. No doubt these rules are in place because of Abby and her gang. Jackson is a less trusting place now, but they'll still fight to do their bit. If they close their gates off to the rest of the world, how are they going to help make the world a better place? Tommy heads into the stable. He walks behind Maria as she's finishing up and telling them to get on their way. She turns around to see him and her face drops a bit. She still loves her husband, but doesn't entirely believe her husband is around anymore. The pursuit of Abby and revenge took that man she fell in love with from her and left behind a bitter, angry man who sees the world covered in grey clouds. She still wears the necklace he gave her, as if this is something that's reminding her to hold on to hope that the man she loves is still in there. Like Tommy, she's someone who needs to hope. Tommy approaches her, but keeps his distance. He can't quite look her in the eyes, so his eyes mostly dart around the floor. His body language and facial expression tells her pretty much everything she needs to know. He didn't convince Ellie to chase Abby again. There's a look of disappointment in him. We know that disappointment is in himself, not in Ellie or anyone else, but Maria remains distant. His view stays low, but he steadies himself, hands on hips. He takes a deep breath. She's better off at the farm, he says. With that, she knows her husband is still in there. The hope is still alive. She lets a little smile crack through for a second despite her best efforts. She hugs him tight, and he breaks down. The grief he's been channeling into anger floods out as he weeps for his brother, for Ellie's father figure, for this complicated, lovable man loved by so many, and for all he lost, for all everyone lost. He kept his composure for a long damn time. He deserves this. Maria stays with him and embraces him for as long as he needs. The shot switches to a wide angle, showing no one else around the stable. No one else, nothing else matters in this moment. He's home. He's alive. They're together again, and he's trying. The sound fades away shortly before we cut to black. The black screen remains for a bit longer than usual to decompress from the moment and let things stir before we head into the final scene. We see Tommy standing quietly over Joel's grave. He's there to face up to his past, to say farewell and move on. Because all we can do is work on the empty pages. You can't go back and scribble out your history. You can't be angry with one of its pages for having words you didn't like. You can just make sure the rest of the story goes well, because the pen's in your hand. Tommy lost himself to his worst qualities, to our worst qualities. He got lower than he'd ever been and doubled down on his actions, and it cost him a lot, in so many ways. But he isn't going to let those worst days ruin the rest of them. He's crawling his way back up. He's healing. He is unbroken. Just as this brotherly love and bond is unbroken. Ultimately, this is a story of redemption, of love, and forgiving yourself. It definitely shares themes of grief and anger with the main game, I'm well aware of that, and that's how it should be. Tommy feels those things too, they're very similar journeys, and to dismiss them would be to dismiss his own pain and loss. But I'm hoping to inject a little bit more hope into this closing act. We don't get a lot of hope in the world of The Last of Us, but we can find it in Tommy, that brother and uncle who, despite turning into a bit of a dick, sees the world a different way. We cut back to the past one more time. Back to the events of part 1. Tommy is working at the hydroelectric dam near Jackson and gets called over by Seth to get into position at the front gate. Spotters have seen an armed guy and a girl heading towards the dam. Tommy gets into position and stays low behind the wall as to not be seen. As the man approaches, Tommy feels like he recognizes the voice talking to the girl. The couple try to shake the gate to get through, and Maria gives the hand signal to tell him and Seth to aim. Tommy takes his spot and aims his rifle to see Joel. Unlike the last few times he's looked down that scope in this story, he has a look of happiness and relief on his face. Still quite in shock, but happy. He tells Maria to open the gate. What, you know these people? I know him. As he heads down the ladder and the gate opens, we follow over the shoulder. We see side of Tommy's face, but full body of Joel for a moment before focusing back on Tommy's face. He's my goddamn brother. We linger for a few seconds in silence as these brothers look at each other for the first time in years. They hug each other tight. It's been a minute since they could do that. We can revel in this moment of happiness. These brothers got their happiness. They had all of that conflict, all of that anger inside of them, but the second they saw each other again, they remembered that it didn't matter. They both came back from the brink. They didn't always see eye to eye, but in the end, for both of them, they knew how their brother felt. They're both people who lost themselves, but found themselves again through loved ones, decent acts, and so much hope. And with that, we cut to black. Don't go anywhere yet. There's an additional bonus scene that I wrote up and wasn't sure whether to put it in or not, and wasn't certain where it would be best, like if it was best just before the credits, or like just after the farm or whatever, or in like a post credits or whatever. So there's one more scene to explain to you guys and tell you guys, and I think it's kind of fun, so hold on a bit before clicking off the video. You may notice a slight change in my voice. Yeah, the stuff you've been listening to so far was recorded in like February, and I'm just finishing off the recording now, 14th of May 2024. My fault. Let's get into it. The camera comes back to a shot of an empty highway road. Similar to the shot seen when Joel and Ellie drive away from Bill's town, except closer to the time of day and lighting of the Santa Barbara section of part 2. Switching to an angle in the middle of the road, we can see a figure in the distance. It's hard to tell who they are at first, but as they approach, we move to a closer shot and we can see that it's Tommy. He's on horseback, the same horse he took to the farm a few scenes ago. It's unclear how much time has passed since then. He looks ahead and he stops, squinting his eyes. We turn to see another figure approaching in the distance. It's difficult to recognize them, so Tommy keeps his hand near his pistol. As he walks further, both him and this stranger stop, and he realizes who it is. He walks as quickly as he can towards an exhausted-looking Ellie. He sees her missing fingers and blood-soaked clothes and looks heartbroken, but at the same time he's thrilled beyond belief to have found her. He gives her a hug, and we can see her eyes swell up with tears, but no tears fall, and she hugs back, tight. He releases her and pulls his backpack off his horse. He takes from the backpack a clean set of clothes and Dina's bracelet that she gave Ellie in Seattle. She seems happy to get the clothes, but immediately feels guilt and pain when she sees the bracelet, a reminder of what she gave up. Tommy sees this in her. A few seconds of silence and understanding pass before Tommy uses his hand to signal her to come to the horse. He hops on and helps her up, and they ride away.
The camera remains where it is as they ride out of focus and they blur out again. Now, I like this idea of the focus and distance making it hard to see both Tommy and Ellie for a moment. I think it's a decent representation of them losing themselves, becoming hard to recognize before coming back together and helping each other find themselves, and how the future of this journey is also not in focus as they ride away. It's not for us to see in detail. We just know that they're heading in the right direction, and that's all we really need to know. So the screen goes black for a few seconds before coming back up to show Tommy filling up his canister of water from a brook. The camera slowly rises and we can see Ellie walking towards him and the farm in the background. She's wearing those fresh clothes, the same one from the last scene in part 2. They look at each other in understanding for a moment. "You good?" he asks. She nods her head in silence. "Got everything you need?" he asks. She looks away from the farm, head held high. "I do," she says, and she means it in every way. He nods, lets out a little smile, and they both ride away from the farm together. Thank you for watching. Okay, epilogue time. Holy fuck, this story is over. September 2022, I started working on this properly. Oh my god. Okay, so I'm just going to take a few minutes to say some thank yous and explain why the fuck it took so long, or at least try and explain it and all of that stuff. So stick around for this little after party. I've got to start by giving a shout out to Chaminda, who is the artist who drew all the storyboards that you saw throughout all of this video, and he did a handful of the ones from the first video as well. I've got a list in the description of the last video of who did which storyboards, but for this video, Chaminda did all of them because I was really pleased and impressed with his work. I think he's a brilliant artist, reasonable rates. He's helped me out as well. Like I've talked to him a fair bit between boards and stuff, between orders, talking about his work and what I wanted to do with this project and everything. So couldn't recommend him enough as a freelancer. If you're looking for work to be done for your projects, or you know someone who does, I strongly recommend talking to Chaminda over on Fiverr. Big shout out to Kenzie and to Levi for keeping me on my toes and demanding that this video gets released. You'll never touch my Kingsmill, I swear down. And to really all of my family and friends, anyone who I've spoken to about this project since 2022, I really appreciate you, because if it was just down to, if I was just left to my own devices, this video would have never seen the light of day, man. I'm fucking useless with it. This is another thing I wanted to talk about. I haven't been working on this project non-stop since 2022. The script was completely finished back then, and then I kind of just sat on the video for a while. I thought it was going to be done in December of 2022. That was quite funny. 2023 just rolled by, and I kind of put it in the background. The part 2 remaster came around, and that was a great excuse to sort of like kick me up the ass and make me release the video in line with something. So the release of part 2 remastered, I thought, you know, people will be excitedly talking about this story again, and that'll be a fun time to talk about this idea for an additional DLC story to go on top of it. And then and then I sort of shelved part 2 of the video. The attention that part 1 got was beyond my wildest expectations. I thought it might get like 4,000 or 5,000 views, genuinely, and then it hit 20,000 views, which is by far the most ridiculous number that has been seen on this channel. And the love that you guys were sending in for it, I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Like, I wasn't working on it in the background going like, yeah, this is a piece of shit. But obviously there was a nagging voice in my head saying like, okay, you know, you might get a bit of hate for this. Part 2 is especially controversial, and this is the first story you've like fleshed out yourself since since Assassin's Creed 2 fanfiction at age 10 or 12 or whatever the fuck I was. It might not be that good, even if you're excited about it. But man, you guys really put me at ease, and I really do appreciate that. So this delay in getting part 2 out definitely wasn't due to not believing that it was worth doing or anything like that. I was desperate to do it. There has not been a single day since finishing the script where I haven't thought about this video. Hopefully tomorrow is that first day. I crunched the numbers the other night, and this video has cost me just over £200 because of the storyboard art that I was commissioning for it. It briefly crossed my mind to use like generative art or something like that, and then I realized that I would rather get joled than do that, because the generative art might as well be slop put on a plate, and that's, you might as well just throw the whole fucking project away if I'm doing that. But I mean, Chams was really generous in a few ways, helping me sort a few things out, and I got to shout out Will Knight as well, who did the thumbnail art and is just absolutely lovely to deal with. And if you need any concept art being done, I can't recommend going over to his Twitter. I'll link it in the description and having a chat with him. I'll try to wrap this up now, because I could talk a good while longer. Going forward, the plan is now, I've been working on it the last few days, the plan is to get one big video done roughly every month or so. So like 10, 15 minutes or longer, with a few little smaller ones sprinkled in between. So the 60-second reviews that are on my channel, I want to start doing them more consistently again. I haven't played a lot of new games recently, so hopefully that's something I can get back into quite quickly. The next big video from me will be a video essay discussion type thing about Firewatch. Happy to say now it's called Firewatch is a horror game, and I will share more about it as soon as I can. I'm really, really excited to dig into that one. All right, thank you again so much for being here. There aren't words that I can use to explain how much I really, really appreciate that, and to be waited on, and to have people excited for an upload of mine. That is something that it's incomparable. Like I actually can't compare it to anything else. It's a real honor. So I really do hope you'll stick around, because there's a lot of stuff that I think is quite cool coming to the channel soon. If you wanna chat some shit or vibe, please do. Please comment, come over to Twitter, whatever. Have a chat about The Last of Us. Have a chat about games or projects, making stuff, whatever. That would be great. Right? Okay. Drink water, love each other, and most importantly,
إلى موطنها وثانيا فلسطين حرة